All right, we can go ahead and get started, and I'll just admit anyone else that joins, like right now. So thank you all for coming to this workshop titled It's Never Too Late to Stop Procrastinating, Strategies for Effective Time Management with Guy Caprio. Just so you know, we are going to be recording this workshop. My name is Adrienne. I also work at the Wellness Center, and I'll just help moderate the chat. If anyone has any issues, just like send me a message and I'll take care of that. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Guy.
Okay, everybody. Well, thanks for coming. Welcome. Obviously, the name of this is It's Never Too Late to Stop Procrastination, Strategies for Effective Time Management. Let me start by introducing myself. I am a licensed clinical social worker at Loyola's Water Tower Wellness Center. I've been doing this at Loyola for about 6 years now. Before this, I changed careers. I traded stocks and options in New York and Chicago. And in that career, there was not a lot of room for procrastination. A bell rang and the market opened, a bell rang and the market closed. That worked out very well for me. When I came back to school, I got my MSW from Loyola. I graduated in 2011, and I learned pretty quickly how easy it was to kind of fall into some negative habits or to wait till the last minute to get things done. So we're gonna cover a few things here, but I think mostly we will focus on probably academics, I would say. And I think most people that are attending this, I would say your academics are probably impacted, which is the biggest motivation to attending something like this in the first place. I've done this once before, and it was more interactive. I only had 2 students attend, but there was a lot of back and forth. We won't have the luxury of that today. But if you have any questions, like in real time, feel free to just put them in the chat box, and Adrienne can let me know. If I don't have time to get to them right away, I hope to finish, and we'll have some time at the end to get over to answer questions as well. Hold on a second. Why is this? Okay, there we go. So first, let's define procrastination. I think it means something a little bit different to everybody. It's making a decision. The important part here for me is for no valid reason to delay or not complete a task or goal that we've committed to, and instead doing something of lesser importance despite there being a negative consequence. So I kind of highlighted the words that I thought were relevant here. And a lot of times it's the no valid reason for why we're making this decision, and we're doing something that we really don't need to be doing instead. And the consequences can look very different there, but there are negative consequences involved. So what are some common thinking errors? People mistake procrastination for laziness. And laziness is a real kind of a trigger word for me, particularly as I become a social worker and been working with people around mental health. I've worked with a lot of young people before I started out at Loyola that struggled with like significant depressive symptoms, that had pretty significant trauma histories, and hearing other people refer to them as lazy really doesn't do justice or minimize like what's going on underneath that's leading us to struggle to get things done. We talk about this as if it's a character flaw, right? Procrastination, but there's a lot more going on under the surface. So for this, people feel free to, if you're comfortable, you don't have to write in the box like some things that you procrastinate about. Here are some examples, and Adrienne, as they come in, feel free to read them. For me, when I came back to school, the things I found that studying obviously was an issue. I always met deadlines and I always attended my classes, but I waited until the last minute a lot to study for exams or to start a paper. Never started anything ahead of time. Even now in my job, paperwork is probably the most difficult part. We have to write clinical notes, and I'm always kind of bumping up against when they're due in terms of finishing those. Adrienne, anything coming in that you want to read? And if not, that's okay. So other things that don't be shy, everybody. Other things that come up, and I've noticed these in other parts of my life. Opening mail, like things I never thought about as was procrastinating about, like opening mail, doing chores around the house. Like I know I might need to get things done, but don't do it. Grocery shopping, making doctor's appointments or medical appointments, things like that. So Again, we're going to focus more on maybe like work and studying, but there are many other aspects of our life where procrastination can play a role and negatively impact us in a number of different ways. How do we procrastinate, right? So things that give us pleasure, watching movies or DVDs, reading books, games, internet, maybe going places like the beach or doing hobbies, socializing, very simple, just being connected to other people, distracting ourselves like taking a nap or eating. More negative ways, drinking or doing drugs. I think about that as more kind of like numbing or avoiding or escaping. Doing lower priority tasks, and some of these have benefits certainly, like exercise or tidying things up. Checking emails if we need to. Those are things that are on our to-do list. They just might be taking the place now of something that's much more of a priority that we need to get done, so we shouldn't be doing. And then just daydreaming, just sitting, thinking about things, really just kind of zoning out, not really focusing on the task at hand. And then excuses. Take a look through these. I'm not going to read all of them, but we can probably all check one of these boxes if we're here in this presentation. For me, I think about myself. If I have like 3 or 4 things to do on a weekend and I'm not sure what to do first, there was a time when there was a good chance I wouldn't do any of them, right? And that's all. If I don't have enough time to do it all, I'll wait until I do it. I won't do anything. So, we make excuses, or we give ourselves a kind of an easy way out, and find reasons to not do things. So in terms of consequences, there are positive consequences. And here's what some of those are. We need to be in charge. Right? There's an increased sense of power and control because now we're doing things on our own terms. If I'm worried about studying or I'm worried about the class, I can just not really think about it. And now it's not going to bother me. Pleasure seeking, right? So an increased sense of pleasure because I'm living for the moment. That's where maybe I'd rather go to the beach, like we had said, or I'd rather hang out with friends as opposed to applying for this job or reading when I know I need to, or studying for my exam. Even if it's in 2 days, I know studying over 2 days as opposed to 1 will be beneficial to me. Fear of failure or disapproval, right? So a reduced likelihood of failure or disapproval from someone else because you haven't put yourself out there to be evaluated. So if you're putting it off, if you're afraid you might not do well, maybe you're setting yourself up for failure. You're kind of self-sabotaging in some way. You're not putting yourself in the best position to succeed. And when you don't succeed or you meet your expectations, you'll have a reason for that. Right? So it's a way of kind of falling back on something and not facing the issue at hand. Fear of uncertainty or catastrophizing. So an increased sense of certainty that you'll have averted a catastrophe because nothing has changed in your life that could tempt fate. Low self-confidence, low self-image. And low self-image is a strong word. I mean, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But again, I'll kind of go back to that self-sabotage term there. You haven't challenged yourself. You potentially haven't revealed your incapabilities or inadequacies, right? So are we putting ourselves in the best position to succeed? If we're always used to kind of being mediocre or just doing just enough, it's hard to change that, right? It's hard to see ourselves getting an A or doing the best we can. There's a lot of work involved in that. There's change involved in that, and we know that change can be hard. And then depleted energy, right? You think you're doing the right thing to replenish your energy, because you're taking it easy on yourself and avoiding challenges. So yeah, I need to take a nap. I need to sleep 10 or 12 hours a night. Yeah, those things are luxuries at times, but maybe we're not scheduling our time appropriately. Maybe we're not doing things to put ourselves in the best position to be caught up, to be able to have enough time to do the things we need to do when we need to do them to get the results that we want to have. And then, of course, the negative consequences. And I think these are the things that we think much more about. They're the ones that resonate much more, that have probably a much bigger impact on our well-being, right? So discomfort. Temporary relief can change to regret and guilt. If we're putting something off until the last minute, there can really be a lot of regret about that. Why did I do this? Why did I put myself in this position? Self-criticism backfires. I've experienced this myself with a cycle of negativity, self-chastising, like lower motivation then to complete the task. increased procrastination, back to self-chastising. So we really kind of see this cycle of negativity. And it doesn't just impact us now trying to complete this task. It impacts other parts of our life as well. You know, we start feeling bad about ourselves. Maybe we start feeling sad or a little bit down. Maybe this impacts us like reaching out to other people to talk or to connect. And ultimately, maybe it increases like anxiety, and now we're not like in as good of a position to study. We don't have enough time to complete the task, so our grade isn't going to be as good as we had hoped it would be or that we want it to be. Things pile up. The longer you put off tasks, the more you have to complete in less time. This doesn't just revolve around academics. Maybe they're, you know, if you're working while going to school, now you have to go to work one day, which you already knew about, but you didn't really factor in. That gives you less time to prepare. Maybe there's a paper you had to do along with the test you wanted to study for. You're also behind on that, so you have to manage that time. Maybe you were scheduled time with a friend, like to celebrate a birthday or to go do something else. Now you need to choose between doing that and doing the studying or doing the paper. So, you know, again, it's if you planned better, if you put yourself in a position to kind of better manage time, all of these things typically wouldn't pile up, and we wouldn't need to make hard decisions about what we want to do and have to prioritize. And then the negative consequences, right? So poor grades, not doing as well as we want to, missing assignments, fractured relationships, and missed events. When I say missed assignments, I mean, it gets to the point for some people where we just don't do it, right? I mean, I'll ask students a lot in therapy. They're like, well, you know, I had a test yesterday and I didn't go. And I'll ask, well, did you email your professor to say, you know, that you were going to miss it? No, I didn't. Well, did you email them like today to apologize for missing it? You know, no, I didn't do that. You know, there might even be someone that's missed classes for 3 weeks and they're coming to see me and they haven't been in touch with anybody or let them know that they missed these tests or missed these classes, and they're not really sure what to say or how to manage it. So I think, you know, this can even get to an extreme. So the sooner that we can manage it and learn to deal with it, the better off we are. Because I think a lot of times, like, we never think something's going to get to the point to where it's gotten out of control. And it may not for many of us, but for some, absolutely it can. What do we mean by managing time successfully? So that means something different to everybody, but for me, it's accomplishing the most important tasks within a given time period, right? So if I have a test on Monday and on Monday and I want to study for my biology exam over the weekend, and I also need to run like a couple of errands, but they're not as important, then the most important thing for me is to know that I studied for my biology exam and that I feel ready for that on Monday. If I got the other 2 tasks completed too, that's great. If I don't, then maybe I could have managed my time a little bit better, but at least I did the most important thing that I needed to do. And then successful prioritization, as the example I just gave, studying above the other things. Myths about time management, right? I don't have control over most events in my life. We actually do. I mean, there are some things that we don't have control over, and I talk to students a lot about that in a clinical setting. But how do we focus on the things that we do have control over and identify those, right? And once we do identify those, as adults, I think we have responsibility to initiate that control to the best of our ability. We can blame other people for a lot of things, and there are some things that certainly are outside of our control. But for the most part, how do we look in the mirror and take responsibility when we can? How do we identify what we can and can't control? And then how do we anticipate future demands to prioritize and address accordingly, right? So again, that's not necessarily only about school, but if it is, when's the last time you looked at a syllabus and you realized what you have due going out 2 weeks or a month? You know, are you aware of what those things are? Are you aware of what you have coming up over the next month in terms of your social life or family commitments? Do you know what your work schedule is going to be? And I know for some people that might be a luxury. Maybe you find out week to week what that is, but if you know what your work schedule is going to look like, how organized are you around that? So that's one way to be able to be aware of anticipation. The word should is something I think that can be triggering for me as well, because I found myself caught up in making should statements a lot. I should be able to do this. In this case, I think it's saying that we should be able to meet everyone else's expectations. If you have a parent or somebody else paying for school, then yeah, maybe there are expectations of maintaining certain grades or having a certain major, um, or doing things according to what someone else thinks that we should be doing. So there are some expectations there, or even in terms of work, right? If the expectation is that you're going to work 20 hours a week and you've committed to that and you have a schedule, yeah, we should be able to meet those expectations because we've committed to that when we've taken the job. But on the flip side of that, how do we clearly define what our own needs are in these expectations? How do we consider what others expect of us? I mean that in terms of family relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, peer or academic relationships, professional relationships. Let's take all these things into consideration. Then how do we weigh our own needs with what other people expect, which may be the following, right? Poor timing. Somebody might just invite us to go out with them, and we have something we need to do for school. Like, if we want to do it, but we can't. We have something due tomorrow, right? So the timing doesn't work. Self-serving. Maybe somebody wants to study with you. You'd prefer to study by yourself, right? You're caught up. You do well in this class. They don't. They haven't been attending class. They want to borrow your notes. They want to study with you because they know it'll be advantageous for them. Like, that's really more self-serving. And if you don't want to study with that person, will you feel obligated to do so? Questionably intended. I mean, that's a little bit more difficult to define here, but I think, I've learned in my life, everybody doesn't always have the best intentions when wanting our time or needing us to help them with something. So being aware of those things. And then what may be unattainable as well, right? I mean, if somebody has expectations for us that just seem totally unreasonable, how do we make sure that we're aware of that, right? It's, somebody's going, say they're moving, and you have to work, and they know you need to work and they want you to take off, right? And it's just not a possibility. Like, you need to be able to work, or it's finals week. You have 3 or 4 exams. They want you to go away with them for the weekend because they're going to see a relative. Like, and the person too, and they want you to come. Well, it's unattainable. It's not going to happen. I should not have limits. One thing I will say through my life experience, when you're younger, and I'm not that young now, you feel invincible. You can stay up all night. You can take 21 credit hours. You can work 20 hours a week. You can, have like another side hustle. You can, go see these concerts and, do all these other things. And yeah, we should be able to do all those things. But I can tell you, we all have limits. And how do we figure out what those are? Failure to accept this may lead to unreasonable expectations for ourselves, including perfectionism. I think perfectionism can be a positive in some ways. We talk a lot about type A personalities, and either we have those ourselves or we know people that have type A personalities. And look, they typically get things done. They like things done a certain way. Everything seems like it's perfect. But when we're overloaded, everything can't be perfect. And if everything can't be perfect, we start getting cracks in the foundation. When we start getting cracks in the foundation, we notice things start crumbling a little bit. And, how do people deal with handing in work that's not perfect, right? Or not getting 100 or an A on a 10 exam when they're used to getting A's? How do we deal with that? And then demanded perfection is unobtainable and leads to procrastination due to the inability to meet an impossible goal, right? So people, that goes back to kind of what I was saying. If I can't get an A on this and I don't know how to start it, then I'm just not going to be able to do it. And now maybe I'm just not going to turn it in. And that maybe leads to that happening in a few other classes. And before you know it, a week's gone by or 2 weeks gone by. And, we're really behind the 8 ball here, and we need help. So just keep in mind, try to have an idea of what your limits are. Do some reflection on that when you have some time. Are people familiar with, and I know nobody can answer this, so I'm kind of asking a rhetorical question, but are people aware with like the phrases of like, oh, I'm a night owl or oh, I'm a morning lark. For me, I can get up in the morning, and I've had jobs where I've had to get up at 5:15 to get ready and commute, and I've been able to do that. I'm kind of I'm wired of a way where if I commit to doing something, I will be there. But I'm also the kind of person that if I commit to going to the gym at 6 in the morning, I'm never getting there, and I know I'm never getting there. If I'm going to meet somebody there, I'll be there. But if you're leaving it up to me, there's no way I'm getting there. When I came back to school, I might start a paper, or start working on something or start studying at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. And self-disclosure, I have kids. When I was back in school, I had twins that were about a year, 2 years old. So part of that was just my routine. If that was when I had time to study. But I had no problem being up from 9 o'clock at night to 2 or 3 in the morning to finish something. I had the ability to be able to do that. So in that way, I think I'm more of a night owl. Having an idea of what your circadian rhythms are and where you fall under in that category, I think is very important, because if you do better studying at night, maybe there's a possibility of you scheduling your classes to start at 10 a.m. or start at 11 a.m., right? Or if you like getting up early to study, do that. Try to get classes that start earlier in the morning. At that point, what you're really doing is you're naturally setting your class time and your study time into when you naturally have more energy. So there's an assessment that I found, your circadian rhythm type. It's a pretty simple, I think it's like maybe 20 to 30 questions. I didn't put it up here, but there's the link to it. Feel free to take a picture of that or cut and paste it. Or I'm happy to send these out to anybody that, my email will be at the end of this, or and feel free to take this survey yourself. And at the end, you can figure out that maybe it gives you a little bit of insight into, how to structure your time a little bit, whether it's early or later, to maximize your potential in order to be productive. Your work environment, what is that like? Is it conducive to concentration and not just comfort? My daughter, I see her studying or like trying to do work on a beanbag chair. I'm kind of old school and I'm like, get up. I don't want you having your computer on that. If you're doing math, I want you to sit at a table and have your paper next to you and just be more, kind of be more structured there. Is your workspace highly organized or is it cluttered? And look, some people do very well in cluttered environments. It might look messy to me, but you know where everything is. But some people need everything a certain way. And that's part of knowing yourself, right? If you need an organized workspace to be productive in the work, and if you look over at your desk and there's papers all over it, clothes, whatever's on there, that could be an excuse for you to not study because you don't really feel like cleaning it right now. So the best you can do to keep that work area neat and organized is going to put you in a position to be more productive and to procrastinate less. Do you like studying in the quiet, or do you like background music? Being aware of that. Do you like studying alone, or do you like being in a group? What's more helpful for you? Do you like being home or in a library or a cafe? And I understand now, obviously with COVID, I made a few changes to this, but I didn't want it to be specifically like, self-isolating around that or quarantining. We can make some adjustments, but let's realize too that we're going to get back to normal at some point. And I want this to also be relevant for that. So now that we're stuck at home, something that comes up a lot in students that I work with is, I didn't procrastinate at all. I used to go down to the law library. I used to go to Starbucks. I used to go over to my friend's place, or 2 or 3 of us would get together to study. I can't do that now. Like, what am I supposed to do? It's a hard question to answer. But for me, it's how are you taking care of yourself in other ways, right? Maybe still study at home, but are there ways that you're able to get outside your environment, to go for a walk or to go for a run, to meet people, to go for a walk, right? So to have that human interaction, but maybe not study together. I understand, the IC is open now, right? So, or the law library might be open. So even though you're going to be socially distanced there, are there still ways to get there to study if that's important to you? And again, I want to acknowledge there are still challenges. Some people still need to rely on public transportation and they're not comfortable doing that, or, parking might be expensive if you're driving. So, I just want to be mindful that there are also going to be barriers to like making this work. COVID certainly makes this more challenging. But if we think outside the box a little bit, how do we come up with ways to make our environment better and more conducive for us to be able to be more productive? Work time. For me personally, as I've been working, like if I have a Zoom call with somebody, it's automatically added to my schedule. That's very helpful. I like to add any meetings that I have outside of that, so I get reminders that they're there. When I was in school, what I would do, because I didn't like having a calendar that I carried around with me. Some people love writing things in their calendar and having it to look at. For me, if I had an exam, I think 2 weeks is the maximum time that you can get a reminder in Outlook. I would remind myself 2 weeks, research exam or clinical paper due. So that told me 2 weeks from now, this needs to be on my radar. I might not start studying for it, but let me set the snooze for 2 days in the future, and let me revisit this. But now I know this is not just gonna creep up out of nowhere. So adding blocks of work and study time to a schedule or calendar can be helpful. I know nobody's in the dorm now, but I kept it there on purpose. Closing your dorm or office door to minimize distractions. Same thing if you live at home, to be able to be in your room to study. If you feel more comfortable studying like in a kitchen or in a shared area, if you live with your folks, being able to ask your folks or somebody else, hey, do you mind if I take this time or this space to study here between these hours and you study in your room? Advocate for yourself a little bit. Try to do what's going to make you feel comfortable. Find a secluded space you feel comfortable if you prefer, where others can't easily find you or specifically ask for privacy, as I just said. Then place your phone on silent or off the work surface, right, to minimize distractions. No reason to show hands, but how many people have checked their phone like just since you've been on this call? I have not, because I'm talking, but I can promise you that on most of the calls I'm on, I'm checking it at least once for sure. One thing I want to say when I talk about Outlook or a calendar, for me that's been helpful, don't just put your work or your tests or tasks you need to do in there. If you want to go to a gym or you want to go exercise outside or go for a run, put that in your calendar. If you want to call a friend and chat or meet somebody to go for a walk and have a cup of coffee, put that in your calendar. The more that you can schedule yourself to try to stay on task, the better off you'll be. And that's not for everybody, but for me, that's certainly been something that's been helpful. When I can wake up in the morning and I can look and say, okay, at 9 to 10, I'm doing this, 2 to 3, I'm doing this, or let me look out tomorrow morning and see what I need to do. Okay, let me start a little bit earlier to send these emails. It just helps me feel more prepared. And when I feel more prepared, I feel more confident and more calm, and then I'm more productive. Prioritization, right? So developing an overview of what you want to accomplish, identify specific time frames, day, week, month. So having 5 goals of the week, those might include, and these can be different for everybody, obviously, study for the biology exam, find study partner for the theology exam, complete your outline, have lunch with a friend, and then attend 2 spin classes at house. That might be two yoga classes at home now. But the idea here is, these are broad, right? There's not like a time frame there, but those are for the week. Let me put those out there and see if they work for me. And I know I can attain these things. Goals should include personal, social, and academic goals. Taking care of yourself is important, right? So maybe it's not a spin class. Maybe it's just taking a walk. Maybe it's just trying to eat a little bit healthier. Whatever that is, take care of yourself. And organize goals in ways that are helpful to you, right? So write each on an index card. I've got a whiteboard recently, which has been helpful. Have a to-do list on your phone or your computer, whatever it is that works for you. I know there are many, many, many tools or apps or things that easily help with prioritization. I'm still kind of old school in that regard. Finally, this is something that I came across when I was putting this presentation together. It's called Covey's Matrix, and it really, really seemed helpful to me. I haven't personally used it, but I've talked to students about it. And in terms of prioritization, I think it's something that could really, really be helpful to people. So there are 2 columns, urgent and non-urgent, very self-explanatory. Same thing with the rows, important and not important. I mean, you're very specific, right? And there's different quadrants here. Quadrant 1's urgent and important. Quadrant 2, not urgent and important. Quadrant 3, urgent and not important. Quadrant 4, not urgent and not important. So let's look at these one by one. First and foremost, in terms of what's important or urgent, and take note that the ones that are in red are not really where we want to be spending our time. We really want to be spending our time in the green here. So necessary or a necessity and reduce, right? We need to meet important commitments here and deal with critical issues as they arise. That's urgent. Not urgent is quality or increase. We want to do more of these things. Important goals, focus and plan, proactive actions. To reduce quadrant 1, the goal is to always be crossing things off in quadrant 1. Not important and urgent. Interruptions we need to manage, so things that appear to be worth doing, cut short, delegate, reject. Those are things we just want to get rid of. And then distractions, right? What can we avoid? Here's another way to look at these things. Emergencies, prevention, planning, improvement, interruptions, and time wasters. So quadrant 1's important and urgent, right? So these are things that we have to have flexibility. We need to get them done. Tasks, they fall in this quadrant because of our poor time management. Although there's also things that just pop up that we didn't really have any control over, right? So a family emergency, you get a call, we need you to come home now. Maybe you didn't plan for that, but that's now something you need to do. You have a hard deadline, right? You have an exam tomorrow morning. It's now 3:30 in the afternoon. Like, you need to study for this. You don't have a choice. You're in a group of 3 other people and one member didn't complete their part and they dropped the class. Now all of a sudden there's 2 of you to do this, right? That's become a priority. You need to get this done in the next 24 to 48 hours. So again, these are priorities. There's not flexibility to get these things done. You need to do them. Quadrant 2, this is where you want to be living, right? Ideally spending most of your time here. The goal is to work on these tasks before they become urgent, right? So the key is kind of staying on top of these. Some of these examples are exercising, if that's important to you, maintaining relationships with friends, grocery shopping, applying to internships, jobs, figuring out your academic course schedule for next semester, or knowing you have an exam in 1 week and planning to study that, right? So as you'll notice, these are things that are across a wide spectrum, but when we are procrastinating, a lot of times we're putting ourselves into a negative mindset, and when we're always struggling to catch up, what are we not doing? We're not working out, we're not talking to our friends, or we're not seeing them because we're too busy to get together. We always have to catch up. We're not going grocery shopping. We don't have food in the house, so we're always ordering out. We're always doing Uber Eats. We're always getting takeout. It's costing us more money. We're not eating as healthy. If we're looking for internships or jobs, or we're looking for classes for next semester, wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be helpful if we had time to think about what those were as opposed to applying at the last minute, or thinking about that at the last minute when we don't really have time? Take some time to figure that out. Figure out what classes you want. Figure out what jobs might be available. Put yourself in a position to apply early. And then knowing when you have an exam, right? If you have an exam in a week, do your best to get your notes ready. Do your next to figure out who you want to study with. Do your best to know how many hours you want to allocate to studying, and get ready to start doing that, right? So that's quadrant 2. Quadrant 3, not important and urgent. Delegate those in an academic setting, which we're mostly talking about. These are not important to you, at least, right? So these are problems brought by others. One thing I used to always say in my previous career, don't make your crisis my crisis, right? It's not my problem. I'm happy to help you if I can, but you also need to learn how to say no, right? So filling in for someone facilitating on a knee board. If you can't do it, say no. If your supervisor calls you and wants you to work one day because someone called off, if you've done that before, yeah, they'll call you, and if you need the money and you can go in, that's great. Do that. If you have an exam the next day, say no if you can say no. Don't feel obligated to do that. People want to reschedule a group project meeting because someone needs to change the time. Well, if that's not good for you, say that. You don't need to change the time. Do what's good for you. Somebody wants to copy your notes before an exam. The night before, if you need to study, sorry, you can't do it. Obviously, a little fantasy football thing thrown in there for anyone that might be relevant to, not a priority. If a friend wants to talk to you about an argument they had with their long distance partner, sure, you want to be there for them and be there for them as much as you can. Obviously, sometimes that might be a priority over studying. I'm not saying it's not, but you need to figure out what's important to you. Like if you're taking, the bar exam the next day, that might be a priority over that. So just keep in mind what you need to do, what's urgent, what's relevant, and then what's not important and not urgent, right? So what's wasteful? Posting on social media, watching sports, taking the online is he, she, they really into you quiz, playing video games. And there's a little caveat to video games. I know that now that we're isolating, video games can be a source of social connection for people. Sometimes that's their main source of social connection. So by no means am I saying or insinuating that's just a waste of time. It is absolutely not. And I've learned that, and I know that through individual therapy sessions, but there are times where it is a waste of time if you have something you need to do, and then shopping for that thing you originally need for an event that's 6 months away. You don't need it now. Don't look at it. Focus on what you need to do. Focus on your test. Focus on class, et cetera, et cetera. And then I left a link here at the bottom for some of the Covey's Matrix information if anybody wants one of those for themselves. If you think it might be helpful, feel free to print that out. Oops. The last one was just kind of going back to questions. So feel free, if anybody wants to type them, or Adrian, if you can let them talk. I'm not sure how it'll work, but I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. We have probably about 10 minutes left or so. I'm sorry I zoomed, no pun intended, through that either, but didn't want to end up without time. And I'm happy to send these slides to anybody as well if they feel like it could be helpful. You can just email me and let me get my information up there at the end here.
Do you mind posting the 2 links that were in your slideshow into the chat?
Sure, absolutely.
That might be easier for participants to access.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. There's actually 3 of them, so I will.
Does anyone have any procrastination tips that work for them that they wanted to share with people? Or anything that Guy covered that they're like, oh yeah, that works for me? We can post in the chat too instead.
I like to bullet journal because it's kind of a fun art way to figure out what tasks I have for the week and stuff. Because I don't like a lot of planners. I just don't like the way they're laid out. So I get to lay out how I want my tasks for the week.
That sounds good. That is certainly something I think could work for me as well. Hold on, I apologize. I'm trying to find the chat here.
Just some things that were coming in that's helpful for people is do a list, making a list and crossing off what you completed, not erasing, not just erasing it on your computer or phone. Oh yeah, I love actually crossing off things on a physical list. It's so much more satisfying.
Absolutely.
Someone says keeping their phone in the other room or giving it to their roommate until they're done with their assignment. That's nice. That's a really good idea.
That is a good idea.
Using a Pomodoro timer. I've actually never heard of that, but 25 minutes on, 25 minutes on working and 5-minute break.
I like that too. I'm not familiar with that either.
There were a couple questions too. Abby asked, what do you tell students that come to talk to you who have fell behind in certain areas, how to move forward in the most efficient manner, if that makes sense?
I think it does make sense. I mean, for me, I like to try to break things up into smaller quadrants, right? So if say you're 2 weeks behind in a class, I mean, I would suggest talking to a professor about that, right? Letting them know it's not easy to do, but letting them know, hey, I'm behind. Like, is there anything that I can do to try to catch up? Because what happens is it becomes insurmountable. Like, work with the professor to help you plan your time management, right? So maybe they'll say, like, I know in a class like accounting or math, everything builds. So if you haven't learned one thing, it might be hard to move on without doing, what you did 2 weeks ago, but that might not be the case in everything. So, um, figuring out what the plan is, and I'm happy to help people do that, but there's also um, other people that can help them with that as well. Maybe like a friend or a roommate. Maybe they can go for like tutoring if need be. That can be helpful with that. But if need be in therapy, I'm happy to help people with that. It's just a matter of figuring out how to prioritize, right? Sometimes you need somebody to say, what does your schedule look like? Let's look at this and see, what can you move? What can you cut out? Um, what's most important for you to complete at this time? So I'm not sure if that necessarily answers the question, but I think a lot of times it's asking for help with a professor as well. Look, it's important to remember nobody doesn't want you to do well here, right? Professors, nobody's high-fiving when people fall behind. Nobody's happy when somebody doesn't get an A or B. Professors aren't like slapped on the back when a student fails their class. They're here to help. It might not always seem that way, and it's hard to ask for help. But there's offers hours for a reason. Utilize those. If there's like student teachers, which I just found out about last year, I had never heard about that before. Trying to utilize those things as well. So, again, for me, part of my job is also figuring out who else is available at the university to help people and to connect people with those resources.
Thanks, guys. Someone also asked, any advice for managing procrastination when it's paired with executive dysfunction? For example, I've got a pretty bad problem with time blindness and often lose a lot of time as a result.
With time blindness?
Yeah. I think like when you don't really know what time it is or like you lose track of time. Correct me if I'm wrong though.
No, I'm not familiar with that term, but that's yeah, that does sound challenging for sure. I have to think about that a little bit. I mean, on the spot, I don't think anything specific. I think it's with that, if that's something newer, I would say, like with a lot of things that I tell people, take a little bit of time to try to track yourself. Going back to like, when do you have energy? When are you more tired? When are you more productive? When are you not? Figuring out if prioritization is time management more of an issue than prioritization, figuring that out also, and really doing like when you do feel productive. Like for example, if somebody has a burst of energy, what's the most pressing thing you need to do? Spend time doing that thing now, right? For a lot of people, energy might be a problem as well. And then I could recommend ways to try to increase your energy, right? And that's through managing your sleep. I've recommended a number of students to Adrian this semester or even last year, right? So that's not a matter of having disordered eating or having a diagnosed eating disorder. That's a matter of just wanting to learn more about diet and nutrition to maximize yourself, right? So again, knowing what resources are available here. But look, for the question around like the time blindness, if you want to reach out to me individually, let me think about that, and I'm more than happy to chat with you offline. Because I don't feel like I really answered that question that well, but I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more about that. I'd be happy to. So my email's there, my direct office number's there. Just if I'm not in the office, leave me a voicemail, and I'm happy to call you back.
Someone also suggested in the chat, once again, a timer. Deanna said once again, the Pomodoro method. So that must give like actual time, like alarms that go off, which might help. That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Deanna.
The Pomodoro, it means tomato in Italian, and the person would use a little tomato timer. And that's why it comes with that name.
Oh. That sounds manageable, like 25 minutes on. I can do anything for 25 minutes. Like
I can too, I think. Okay, everybody. Well, if you keep questions coming for sure. I know we have a few more minutes, but before that, I just want to thank everybody for your interest in this. Again, if anybody wants even access to the slides, I'm happy to, to share those. If you think anything else would be helpful, if something seems like more of like a longer term or like clinical issue, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to people about our phone triage process. It's like a 30-minute phone evaluation that myself and all the other therapists do. You can sign up for those online through our website, or I'm happy to put somebody into an open slot if we talk on the phone, or just to talk more about what general wellness center resources are. We have a large number of individual therapists. We have group therapy options. We have options that are not specific like clinical groups, but just more like information or psycho-ed groups. So just something else to keep in mind. Thanks, Adrian.
thank you, everyone. We can stay on for about like 3 more minutes if anyone has any other questions.
Sounds good.
Does your office assist people who have ADHD?
In terms of assistance, so typically, yeah, absolutely. We see a number of students that struggle with like attention issues. In terms of meeting with a therapist, we don't really have therapists that like quote unquote specialize in anything. But I'd be happy for you or anybody else to, we could go through a phone triage process. We can refer people out for testing if need be, like psychological testing. We have psychiatrists on staff. Through an Illinois law, we cannot prescribe medication for ADHD, like university wellness centers can't, but just in general, yeah, absolutely, it is something that we've worked with students on in a clinical capacity. I'd be happy to talk to you more about that outside of this space as well.
Yeah, medicine's only going to help so much.
For sure.
Thank you.
Of course. And thank you, Adrian. I really appreciate you you running this thing as like the roadie, getting it, making it happen. I just showed up and sang the song, so thank you.
Of course. It doesn't look like there's any other questions, so I'm just going to end this session now. But great job and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everybody.